Hello students! Today we are going to continue our lesson about texture by creating a texture paper collage. Before we begin, let's create a sample board of different textures we can make out of paper. This will help give us inspiration for our artwork as we create the collage. For our sample board, you will need 2 pieces of paper with contrasting colors. Here I chose black and white. You will also need scissors and different types of adhesive. Here I have tape, liquid glue, and a glue stick. I also have extra tools here just in case I need them, brushes and a bowl for the liquid glue. You are also provided with a toothpick. If you have that toothpick handy, I recommend using it for this project as well. Or you can use a sharp pencil to poke through paper later. For our texture sample page, you are going to have 1 sheet of paper as your backing, and the other sheet will be cut into sample pieces. Let's create a curly fringe sample. Cut short rectangles that are wide in width. I cut 3. Take your scissors and cut strips partway, creating a straight fringe. With a pencil, the handle of a thin paintbrush, or just your fingers, curl the fringe. It makes a fun curled texture, doesn't it? Now you can layer them on top of one another with a glue stick, like so. Think about what this can be used for. Maybe the hair on someone's head, the roof of a house, or maybe this technique can be used for blades of grass on the ground. This next one is an easy way to make really cool texture with paper. All you have to do is crumple it up. How can you best use a crumpled texture in your paper collage? Maybe you can use it for clouds in the sky or the bumpy texture of a tree trunk. Here's another fun one. Cut thin strips of paper, go to one edge, and fold your paper back and forth to create pleated squares. You can do this crimping technique with paper of any size. Let's think of ways we can use this idea. Maybe stairs inside of a house, crimped hair on a person's head, or lightning bolts coming down from a dark cloud. As we've seen in previous art projects, there are many ways to use thin strips of curled paper. You can glue the spiraled paper on its side to make it look like pasta noodles. Or you can glue one end and let the rest of the curl hang off the page to create a bouncy spring. You could also tape the spiral closed into a circle like I've done in this sample and glue it flat with liquid glue or double-sided tape. Just make sure you press down firmly so it will stay in place. Here's a technique to get pointy, springy texture. I call this the accordion fold. Take 2 strips of paper that are the same long length and thin width. Glue the ends together to make a 90-degree angle. Then you are going to fold the paper on top of one another, back and forth, until you have an accordion. Glue the other end so it doesn't unravel. Glue one end of the accordion onto your paper and you have a bouncy spring, or glue both ends onto the paper like I did in the image, and you have a cool rounded accordion coming off of the page. With a sharp point, like a toothpick or a sharp pencil, you can poke holes in the paper to create a bumpy texture. Just turn the paper over to feel the bumps you made. How would you use this in your collage? I will show you how I used this texture in mine later in the video. You cannot see this technique very well on the white paper, but what I did was emboss the paper by drawing designs and patterns with a pointed tool. Take your toothpick or the dull end of something pointy like a mechanical pencil tip without the lead and draw on the paper without poking through. Turn your paper over and feel the bumpy texture you created. Here is my texture sample board. I am going to set this aside and use it for inspiration as I make my textured paper collage. For the art project of this lesson, you will need the same materials as we used for the sample board, plus colored construction paper. If you do not have colored paper, you can always color over white paper to get the colors you need. I also recommend using cardstock for the background of your piece, so all the pieces you glue will be on a sturdy piece of paper and will not wrinkle. I decided on making a textured outdoor landscape. You can follow along with me or create a textured piece that's entirely your own. I am going to begin creating the ground for my landscape using the fringe texture. First, I am going to take green colored paper and cut 2-inch thick strips lengthwise. Now I am going to fold it in half and cut narrow points to look like blades of grass. I did this to 2 strips of paper. I glued the first strip of paper with glue stick near the bottom of the page, but not all the way to the edge. Then I took the second one and glued it in front, lining it up with the bottom edge of the paper. There are a couple ways to make the blades of grass move off the page. You can press each blade with your finger and bend them upright, or you can ruffle them all at once with your fingers so the blades go in different directions. Let's make a tree. To make a tree, cut the trunk with its branches. I'm not too worried with how my branches will look like because they will be covered with leaves. To give my tree trunk texture, I crumpled the paper up to give it creases and folds. When I glued it behind the grass, I pinched it a little, as its folds will give it more physical texture. Here I cut a bunch of thin strips of autumn-colored paper for the leaves. I am going to curl all of these and glue them onto my tree. Now that all my strips of paper are curled, I am going to reference my sample sheet and glue the leaves in different ways, some on its side, some tangled. I'm going to keep gluing leaves until the branches are covered and the tree is full. I will also have a couple leaves fall off the tree and onto the grass. I created more strips of paper to create the sun. I am going to use these crimped strips of paper as the sun rays and tape the curled pieces of paper for the body of the sun. Watch what I do to these curled pieces of paper. I take the liquid glue and brush it into the shape of how I want my sun to look in the corner of my collage. Then I carefully place the circles flat onto the glue, pressing firmly so they stay in place. If you do not have liquid glue, you can try this method with tape or thick coatings of glue stick. Once I finished the rounded shape of the sun, I started gluing down the sun rays. Here are some teardrop flower petals I cut, similar to the ones I made in the mosaic from our last collage project. For the pollen in the center, I am going to cut yellow circles. Then I'm going to take that toothpick and carefully poke holes into each circle to give it the bumpy texture. Cut green strips of paper for the stem and cut out 1 or 2 leaves for your flowers. Work with me as I assemble these flowers onto my collage. Remember, whenever you work with liquid glue, just use a dot, not a lot. Here's my finished landscape collage. It's really cool to feel the different textures you can create out of paper. What shapes did you create with your collage? Did you discover new textures different from the ones in this video? Please share with me your creations. I would love to see them. Until next time, take care and stay creative.